For most of American history, saving money wasn't about wealth or ambition. It meant safety. It meant that when life surprised you, there was something standing between stability and collapse. Savings created peace of mind, not excitement, not growth, just the quiet confidence that one unexpected bill wouldn't immediately push a household into panic or long-term financial damage. That belief hasn't disappeared. Americans are still told that saving more is the foundation of financial security. Even as daily life feels increasingly fragile, people still hear the same advice. Build an emergency fund. Be disciplined. Plan ahead. These rules sound timeless, responsible, and logical, and for a long time, they actually were. But here's where the discomfort begins. Millions of Americans followed those rules carefully, saved consistently, and still discovered that protection didn't arrive when they needed it. Their savings existed. The numbers were real, but one medical bill, one repair, or one unexpected event was enough to erase years of careful planning. So the real issue isn't that Americans suddenly forgot how to save. The real issue is that saving stopped working the way people were promised it would. At some point, quietly and without warning, savings lost their ability to absorb risk. And that moment changed how American households experience money forever. To understand when that happened, we have to step back, not to ancient history, but to a time when income, costs, and savings still moved together. The shift didn't arrive suddenly. It unfolded quietly over decades. As the financial math beneath everyday life slowly stopped making sense for a long time, the financial system had buffers. When wages rose, costs followed slowly. Savings had time to grow, and households could recover from shocks without immediately falling behind. Money moved slower then. Inflation was lower. Costs changed gradually. Savings accounts weren't impressive, but they had time to do their job, absorb pressure before it reached daily life. But slowly, the balance started to change. Wages began to lag, costs didn't, and the distance between income and expenses started growing wider each year. Inflation didn't arrive as a crisis. It arrived quietly. Groceries, housing, healthcare, and education rose just enough each year to feel manageable until they weren't. Savings didn't shrink overnight. They just stopped keeping up. What once covered months of risk slowly became weeks, then days, then nothing more than temporary relief. This is the moment most people miss. Savings didn't fail because people stopped trying. They failed because the system stopped giving them enough space to work. Expenses began arriving faster than income. Shocks became more frequent, and households had less time to recover before the next one arrived. Savings were no longer protection. They became temporary delay, a pause button, not a solution, and a system that now demanded constant financial response. This is when financial stress changed shape. Anxiety wasn't caused by mistakes anymore. It came from knowing that one event could undo everything. When savings stopped absorbing shocks, something else quietly took their place. Not because it was better, but because there was no other option left. When savings could no longer absorb shocks, credit quietly stepped into that role, not as a choice, but as a substitute. It became the only remaining buffer between households and immediate collapse. At first, credit didn't feel dangerous. It felt helpful. It smoothed gaps, covered emergencies, and by time, for many families, it looked like a reasonable solution to a growing problem. Over time, credit stopped feeling temporary. It became normal. Groceries, utilities, and everyday life quietly moved from cash to plastic. Minimum payments created the illusion of control. As long as something could be paid, the system felt manageable even as the total quietly grew in the background. Credit didn't remove risk. It delayed it. Pressure was pushed forward month after month, turning short-term relief into long-term dependency. Interest quietly changed everything. What started as assistance slowly became extraction, pulling money away from future stability and into permanent repayment. As credit balances grew, saving became harder. Money that once rebuilt safety now serviced past emergencies, locking households into a cycle they couldn't escape. This was the structural shift. Savings no longer absorbed shocks, credit did. And once that switch happened, the system began behaving very differently. Financial anxiety became constant, not because people failed, but because their safety net now charged interest and punished delay. Once credit became the emergency system, every problem grew heavier. Because emergencies were no longer absorbed, they were financed. Once credit replaced savings, emergencies no longer stayed rare. Small problems stacked together, turning routine life events into ongoing financial strain that never fully reset. Households used to recover between setbacks. Now, there's no pause. Each expense arrives before the last one is resolved, leaving no time to rebuild stability. This pressure didn't stay at the margins. It moved into the middle class, where savings once provided breathing room and now barely slow the fall. Jobs didn't disappear overnight. Paychecks still arrived, but stability became fragile, dependent on everything going right all the time. Savings quietly changed roles. They stopped being protection and became temporary relief, a buffer measured in days instead of months. This constant pressure created exhaustion, not from spending too much, but from managing risk that never truly disappears. Financial stress became background noise, something people learned to live with instead of solve. Because there was no clear exit in the system, mistakes aren't allowed. One missed payment or one unexpected cost can trigger cascading consequences that savings can no longer stop. That's why fear feels constant, not panic, but quiet awareness that stability depends on things staying perfect. And yet, people are still told the solution is simple: budget harder, save more, work longer. Advice that no longer fits the system it's applied to. As the system changed, the advice didn't. Americans kept hearing the same solutions, even as the conditions those solutions were built for quietly disappeared. Budgeting was designed for a system with margin. When costs rise faster than income, budgeting doesn't create space. It only decides which problem arrives first. Earning more used to restore balance. Now, higher income often just means higher costs, leaving households running faster without moving forward. Cutting small expenses feels responsible, but it can repair a system where fixed costs dominate household finances and savings no longer have room to grow. These strategies weren't wrong. They're just outdated, built for a financial reality that no longer exists for most American households. The deeper truth is simple. Savings didn't fail because people stopped being disciplined. They failed because the system stopped absorbing risk. Credit replaced savings not by accident, but by necessity. It became the infrastructure holding daily life together when protection disappeared. This is why financial anxiety feels constant. It's not emotional weakness. It's the logical response to living without a real safety buffer. Understanding this system doesn't fix everything, but it changes where blame belongs and why clarity matters more than discipline alone. This channel exists to explain how money actually works today, without blame, hype, or shortcuts. If you want clarity instead of confusion, subscribe to Fix Your Money.